This is Tools of Geometry, and your objective today is I can find the midpoint of two segments. The skill that you should be working on is not just B8 now, but it should also be B7. B7 is also a skill that you should be able to work on and complete. Okay, so the midpoint. A midpoint, again, you're writing this down. Midpoint is going to be a segment that divides the segment into two congruent segments. So if I have a line, AB, and then on that line, AB, I have segment AB. I'm going to highlight segment AB in blue. Here's segment AB, and it's from this point to this point. And if I wanted to figure out what the midpoint of this segment would be, I'd have to cut this into two equal pieces. So let's do that. Create a point here. And this point would be point M. We'll call it point M. And now this means that AM is going to be congruent to MB. So segment AM is now congruent to segment MB because M is the midpoint. Important to remember when segments with congruent lengths are congruent segments. Okay, very important. So while we say segment AM is congruent to segment MB, we also could quantify that and give it numerical values. If we would actually measure it out and say it back up here, if AM was 4 and this piece over here was 4, then we'd actually be able to talk about how the measures of those lengths would actually be the same too. Okay, let's try an example. And this is an example actually from my Excel where we're finding the distance between 2 points. The first point is 12, 0, and the second point is 0, 5. So I'm actually going to draw on the vertical here. And it looks like the vertical is a distance of 5. I'm going to draw on the horizontal. Which we clearly see is a distance of 12. Then I'm going to use Pythagorean theorem to figure out that other side, that hypotenuse I don't know, which turns out to be my missing side. Pythagorean theorem, I'm going to plug in what I don't know. The two legs I know, so I've got 5 squared plus 12 squared equals c squared. And I want to just simplify it. Here with 169 equals c squared, and I want to take the square root of both sides. If I do that, I'm going to end up with c equals square root of 169 is 13. So that means this length, the distance, shortest distance between the 2 points is 13. Now again, you could have used the distance formula, but again, I feel like this is just a method that's going to be easier and definitely helps you understand the problem better. Okay, so now let's move on to midpoint, our new topic for today. So the midpoint again is going to be that point that creates two congruent segments within a segment. So if we know the endpoint is at -4 and the other point is at 9, I want to take these 2 points, these 2 numbers, -4 plus 9, and I want to add them together. And I want to divide by 2 because I want this right in the middle. So that's going to give me 5 over 2, which turns out to be 2.5. So that means the midpoint for this segment that is just horizontal is going to be 2.5. So somewhere right about here. Somewhere about there. How about that? Well, now let's look at a segment that has it on an x and a y axis, not just an x axis. So let's first figure out the points A and B. So now if we look at the coordinates of A is at -9, -6, and B is at 6, 6. So I want to now add the x values and divide by 2. I'm going to do the same thing with the y values. Now I have both coordinates of the midpoint, the x and the y. The x is simply going to be that -3 over 2. And the y is whatever 0 divided by 2 as well. 0 divided by anything is just 0. So this is the coordinate of the midpoint. Let's put it in. It appears to be right at this blue dot. So here's example 4. Example 4 says the midpoint of CD is M, -2, 1. And they were giving you an endpoint. An endpoint is -5, 7. So that's here. So you're getting an endpoint and a midpoint. And it says, well, what's the coordinate of the other endpoint? So we did it traditionally. We'd actually plug in the x's, the y's, and we find the midpoint, the x and the y. But now we have to kind of work backwards. I'm going to plug in what I know. So I know very clearly that -5 is the x-coordinate of one of the endpoints. So I'm just going to put that in because that's what it says to do. But I don't know the other endpoint, right? It's missing. So I'm just going to leave that as x sub 2. But I know the midpoint's x value is -2 because it's right there. So that's what we would normally get. This is what we already have. So now what's missing is just the x sub 2. And I'm going to cross multiply in a minute to figure out what that is. And I'm going to do the same thing for the y. I know the y1, one of the endpoints is, well, 7. I'm going to plug that in. I don't know the other endpoint it's missing. And then I'm going to plug in my y midpoint value. The midpoint of the y coordinate goes here. And then I'm going to cross multiply in a moment to figure that out. So if I just put this over 1 here and put this over 1, you can do that so that you can cross multiply. So here I've cross multiplied. -5 plus x2 times 1 just gives me that. And then -2 times 2 is going to give me -4. Now I want to solve for x sub 2. Now I know that one of the endpoints coordinates is going to be 1, and that's the x. So this is actually going to be at 1. Let's see what the other one is. Cross multiplied again. Now I'm going to just subtract 7 from both sides. It appears that we get -5. So this is going to now be -5. So the coordinate of the other endpoint is 1, -5. So if we were to actually look at it practically and try and figure out where is 1, -5, 1 over 1, down 5, about right there. And it looks real, like that actually makes sense. Like if these 2 points were the endpoints, then that would be the midpoint of the segment. Okay, so here's a secret hot question. It says, hey, on a zip line course, if you've ever been camping on a zip line, it's so fun. You're harnessed to a cable that travels from treetop to treetops. You start at platform A, and platform A is actually right here, okay? And you're zipping to each of the platforms. Well, how far do you travel from B to C? So if you want to find B and find C, I'm going to give you a hint here. You want to figure out what the points are. What is the point here? What is the ordered pair, the coordinates for B and for C? And then you literally want to find the midpoint. Remember to record your secret answer on the Google Doc. Have a great night.